You call that a sword? Now this is a sword! Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy and welcome to my channel. Well, today we're going to be taking a look at what is considered by a lot of critics to be the best game made for the N64. It constantly gets 10 out of 10 by game publications. You see it on the top list even nowadays of the best games of all time. I'm talking about, of course, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Of course, some of these publications and YouTube channels would put the worst game of all time as E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and having owned that game as a kid, I can tell you it's not the worst game of all time. So does this mean that Zelda Ocarina of Time isn't the best game of all time? Yeah, not really. In fact, it's not even the best Zelda game in my opinion. I would prefer A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds, and maybe even Twilight Princess above Zelda Ocarina of Time. However, does that mean it's not a good game or worth playing? Heck, it's a really great game, and it's still worth playing even after 20 years if you don't mind some of those age spots, and some of them are really ugly. But it's not the best game in my opinion. It's not even freaking close. So let's take a closer look and see what's good and bad about this timeless classic. The game starts off with a young Kokiri boy named Link having a nightmare about confronting an evil wizard. Now Link is special among the Kokiri tribe because he doesn't have a guardian fairy to nag him and tell him what to do. However, that changes when he meets Navi, who tells him to go see the great Dooku tree. After running around the insides of the giant tree and some more exposition by the Dooku tree, who tells him that a man named Ganondorf is trying to get into the secret realm so he can steal the Triforce and take over Hyrule. The Dooku tree gives him a stone, tells him to go see Princess Zelda, and then kicks the bucket. After a brief visit with Princess Zelda, Link finds out that he needs to find 2 more spiritual stones in order to stop Ganon. He needs to visit Hyrule's neighbors, the Goron tribe and the Zora tribe, to get those stones, so he can enter the Sacred Realm before Ganon and snag the Triforce. After helping out the Gorons and the Zora tribe in getting their 2 special stones, Link hightails it back to Hyrule Castle, only to find out that the castle is under attack, and as he enters the castle town, he sees Zelda escaping and she tosses him her ocarina. Link uses the Ocarina of Time to enter the Door of Time, which is in the Temple of Time, and sees a sword. Now, common sense would tell you if you open something called the Door of Time inside something called the Temple of Time, you might not be wanting to monkey around with the magic sword that you see in the pedestal, but Link in his infinite wisdom decides to pull out the sword. He wakes up 7 years later, finds out that Ganon has pretty much conquered Hyrule, and the only way to stop him is that the Hero of Time, which Link has now become, can combine his power with some of the ancient sages that now dwell in the temples of Hyrule. He might stand a chance of saving Hyrule. Okay, let me call BS on some of the story. First off, in The Wind Waker, which is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, might I add, Link looks a lot younger in that game, and he manages to pull out that sword and wield it just fine for his small body, no growing up needed. Second thing, that Ganondorf is so bad that Hyrule is in the Age of Darkness, then why the heck is traveling the overworld in most places easier and safer as an adult than as a kid? Hyrule Field as a kid is full of bad guys and pee-heats. As an adult, it's empty and pretty much safe. Kakariko Village is actually growing, and while he may have frozen Zora Domain there, giant fish which was pooping all over Hyrule's water supply is now gone. The only bad thing I can say Ganon has done is he must have thrown one hell of a kegger in Hyrule Castletown, because that is now trashed, but for the most part, everything seems to be better as an adult under Ganon's care. King of Evil my butt. It's more like King of Improves Everything. Oh well, on his quest to defeat Ganon, he does have some help when he quickly bumps into a mysterious ninja named Sheik, who manages to know where all the temples are and gives him songs to help him find them and locate them. And yes, Super Smash Bros. Gave away who this really is. And it's kind of a shame. It's actually a pretty decent plot twist. Nintendo gives away enough clues to make you wonder who this is and not be too shocked when she finally takes off the mask and we find out it's Zelda, but at the same time not be like that's BS or that doesn't make sense, because it makes perfect sense by the time it is all added up. It's a great plot twist. It's kind of a shame Smash Brothers has already ruined this. While it's not the best crafted story of all times for a video game, Ocarina of Time story still holds up fairly well today. Alright, let's move into the gameplay. In Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is that of a dungeon crawler, just like all the other Zeldas. You have to find your way into dungeons and collect the items needed to beat the boss, and then get the MacGuffin that is needed to save the world at the end of the dungeon. While it is the first 3D Zelda game, they took plenty of cues from A Link to the Past on how to do the initial setup. The first 3 dungeons are done in the past as a kid, while the last 6 are done in the future as an adult. Being the first 3D Zelda game, the game also starts us off with a larger tutorial area in the forest, having you collect enough money to buy a shield from the store. Yeah, that sounds real freaking familiar. Except this time it takes about 2 minutes at max to collect those rupees and the sword, and getting into Hyrule Field takes a half an hour at most, and that includes the first dungeon. Granted, first-time players are going to probably take a little longer trying to figure out the first dungeon than an expert pro like me, but still, it takes only an hour or 2 at most to get into Hyrule Field, and that sure the hell beats 4 to 5 hours that it took in Twilight Princess. As for the time-traveling aspect goes, I'm going to have to stick to my jokes in the story section. The biggest disappointment for me was when I got to the evil Ganondorf-controlled future and actually found it was safer and easier to get around than being a kid in Hyrule. I'm not kidding. As a kid, you have to deal with stall kids at night and these pea heats if you explore off the beaten path. In Ganondorf's evil Hyrule, the field is practically free from monster attacks except for a few weak ghosts. In pretty much every area you explore, there are less monsters and your weapons are bigger and able to handle the confrontation. Like I said, Ganondorf's been good for Hyrule. This is contrasted by A Link to the Past. Here, when you enter Ganon's Dark World, which is a mirror version of Hyrule, the game goes from making you a powered badass to making you feel more helpless, as there's more monsters and they take a lot more damage to kill. Here, I'm going, why am I out to kill the King of Evil when for the most part the place seems safer and at peace under his rule? Oh well, the dungeons for the most part are pretty cool, and they are the correct length of a Zelda dungeon. Beating these things takes an hour or 2 at tops. One of the reasons why I don't play the 3D Zeldas as much as the 2Ds is just the length of the dungeons. Some of them go on for fricking forever. Here, an hour or so is all you really need to beat the dungeons, and there are some really cool boss fights. The fights against boss Duodongo and the fight against the Bongo Bongo boss are really cool boss fights. There are also a few mini dungeons that have to be completed, and some of these are fun moments. One of my favorite is the Gerudo Fortress, where you have to be stealthy. I don't know why when I have this giant sword and these ladies go down in one hit. Still, it's a pretty cool area as you have to sneak around and try to save hostages and win the Gerudo's respect. If there is one temple that sucks, it's the water temple. Yeah, let's see here. We have to constantly go into the menu to take on and off these boots, and it's a constant pain. You have to use the boots to sink, and you have to take them off in order to swim to the top. And this is made even more frustrating in the GameCube version because there's a slight pause to accessing that menu. The stage layout is confusing with similar looking rooms and passageways. Getting to places where you can raise the water is a pain. They made so many changes in the 3DS version just to accompany this dungeon. One last thing I should also say on a more trivial note, while I was reviewing The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, I kept mentioning how many times they referenced Ocarina of Time. This game references another past Zelda game, one that's looked upon a little less fondly, while it's not in its story but in its gameplay elements. It references Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link. All the sages in this game are named after towns in Zelda 2. Also, walking the paths on Hyrule Field at night will keep the stall kids from attacking. This is very similar to Zelda 2, where staying on the paths will keep enemies from showing up. And finally, there is a battle with Shadow Link in the Water Temple, and Shadow Link is the final bad guy in Zelda 2. The graphics in this game are a mixed bag. The settings for its day are really good. Areas like Hyrule Castle Town, the Field, and Death Mountain all have a unique look to them, and they manage to hold up fairly well today. The temples may not have the flair that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess temples had, but they still look pretty good. The things that have aged like milk are the character designs. You get a lot of cringe-inducing characters and characters that you just don't want to look too closely at in this game. And speaking of hideous character designs, let me introduce you guys to one of the most freakiest things I've seen in a video game. A character design more scary than anything you've seen in a Resident Evil game. A character that's guaranteed to give you nightmares. Yeah, probably the most freakiest thing I've ever seen in a video game. The fairies are usually uniquely designed for each Zelda game and usually are beautiful in their own way. Here, they're scarier than any monster in this game. Parents, if you're worried that your teenage boy might knock up a girl, just tell him that this is what all women look like naked. That said, if you do manage to convince him of that, don't expect any grandkids. The game does not run all that smoothly. The frame rate is a little bit low, especially compared to modern games. It's passable, but don't expect a smooth experience in this one. The music in this game is outstanding, and while it doesn't top the Wind Waker score, it still sounds pretty good and has some really memorable soundtracks of its own. It doesn't have any of the original Zelda theme though, and that is a little disappointing. But I think Nintendo was going for, we're doing something different with this one, so it's going to sound a little different. But it's still going to feel like Zelda in its music, and they succeeded. And although it has no voice acting, it just has screams and such like you expect from a modern day Zelda game. For the most part, they sound fine. I said for the most part. I give Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time a 3.5 out of 5 if I have to give it a score. It's about tied with the Wind Waker, to be honest with you. While it's a lot smoother to play and traversing the field, even if there are no enemy encounters on the field, it's still a lot more interactive and fun than Wind Waker's sailing. It still has its own share of problems with the character designs, and again, the empty field is a bit of a disappointment. Now I'm going to talk about the 3DS version, just in case you're wondering. That game gets a 4.5 out of 5. The graphics are tremendously improved. Things like Death Mountain really stick all the way out in the field, and they're not just a pre-rendered shadow in the background. You see things like the mountain from Hyrule Castle Town and Lon Lon Ranch, giving a feel that it is a connected world, and the character designs are for the most part really improved, and everything looks great. Well, mostly everything. The frame rate is improved, and they fixed a lot of the things that made the Water Temple such a frustration pain to complete. I know it costs quite a bit more money to get it, and it's a Nintendo portable version, but the 3DS is definitely the superior version to seek out if you're wanting to try and experience this game. Anyways, this is Tommy. I'm signing out now. If you want to, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you as a member of my community.